Imagine if you could learn at twice the speed at which you currently do. How would you apply this new superpower to your life? What would this mean for your career progression? And what would you do with all of this new-found time that you have in your hands? Now, to be perfectly honest with you, I am not a natural quick learner. When I was a kid, I usually had to reread the same page over and over in order for a concept to finally stick. Yet, about 3 years ago, I was introduced to the concept of meta-learning, which is essentially learning how to learn faster. And it's safe to say that the last 3 years have by far been the most successful of my life. So the purpose of this video is to share with you some of the most commonly cited habits amongst super learners. That is people who have been able to pick up a skill or a craft at an incredibly short amount of time compared to the rest of the population. And this evidence comes from hundreds of blogs, loads of great books on the topic like Ultra Learning and Deep Work by 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, and my own personal experience. So without further ado, let's kick off with habit number 1, exceptional focus. Focus is a key ingredient to learning and something we have to rely on far more as adults than we did as children. From a neuroscience perspective, focus helps to enhance neuroplasticity, which is our brain's ability to change per an experience. One of the best examples that I found of focus was a lady called Mary Somerville. Now, Mary is largely regarded as the Queen of Science. Being a 17th century female Scottish scientist, she achieved humongous feats in her field towards gravitational theory and mathematics. Yet the most impressive thing about Mary was not only the fact she achieved this during a time when women were scorned for picking up a book, but rather her ability to have incredible laser-like focus. She was very well known for balancing multiple household duties, rearing her children and breastfeeding whilst having a book of mathematics in her hand and being so absorbed into her learning and her discipline. Now, evidently, Mary's contributions and her learning allowed her to immortalize herself in the field of science. So the question becomes, how can we look to enhance our own focus? I actually asked this question to a Stanford neuroscientist called Andrew Huberman on Instagram, and his response was actually quite simple. Focus is a lot like a muscle, in the sense that the more that you train it, the better it gets, and then the faster that you learn. So the best way to actually train your focus is to use a timer, such as a Pomodoro timer, to time out how long you can focus on one thing. Maybe it's a task or a skill set, and then the next time you try and do that, try and extend it 1 or 2 more minutes. So habit number 2 is direct learning. Have you ever heard of a footballer who's made it international after studying football? Or let's say, have you ever seen a public speaker who's great on stage because he's read some books about it? Or maybe in your own experience, how useful was that language class that you took in order for you to actually speak French? Now, the reason why these answers are most likely no is due to a phenomenon called direct learning. Typically, when a lot of us approach learning, we tend to skirt around the end skill at which we're trying to achieve. Whereas direct learning actually tells you to practice that skill as identical as you possibly can to the end outcome that you want to achieve. Now, to put that into context, a super learner would approach French not by studying it in books or going on an app, but rather they would continually try and speak French with a native French speaker until they can finally hold a fluent conversation. Now, I've got a story of my own that reflects a little bit about how direct learning was a game changer. So when I was in university, I won a really good competition in order to speak in front of a board of investors for them to invest into my business idea. Now, I had about a week to prepare my pitch, and to be perfectly honest, I was terrified of public speaking. So within this week, I read as much public speaking books as I could. I watched numerous TED Talks on the topic, all in which to educate myself and give myself a better chance. When the week finally rolled by, I stood in front of the board of investors and I pitched my idea. The problem was, the moment I was on stage, it felt like all of the knowledge that I thought I had just leaked out my brain. I was nervous as hell, and I didn't get the investment. Fast forward, let's say 5 years from then, so a couple of years back from now, and I did my first public speech for Toastmasters, which is a speaking club. Now this time around, I was really familiar with the act of direct learning. So rather than reading about public speaking or watching videos about it, instead I got a script and a mirror, and I just practiced and practiced. Then once that was done, I practiced my public speech in front of my girlfriend to get feedback. When the final evening came for me to deliver my first speech to Toastmasters, it went great. It was completely night and day to the one I performed a few years back. Yes, I was still nervous, but to be perfectly honest, I delivered the best I possibly could at that time. And that's because I took a direct approach to learning. So it's really been a game changer. So the key takeaway here is the next time that you're going to approach a task, or let's say a skill that you want to improve in, try your best to mimic the actual end outcome that you want to achieve, and not by reading it or doing theoretical things. Focus on being a practitioner rather than a theorist. So habit number 3 for super learners is that they all have an insatiable hunger for feedback. Now there's a quote that says, failure is feedback, and feedback is a fuel for improvement. So the question becomes, how can we ensure that our engines are consistently being fueled by feedback so that we can reach new and higher heights of learning and skill growth? Well, comedians like Chris Rock actually have a brilliant answer for this. Shortly before they go and do their huge comedic sketches in front of thousands and thousands, they're very well known to go to a smaller venue, maybe a week or two before, to practice their routines. The reason they do this is to get completely unfiltered, unadulterated, sometimes uncomfortable feedback on their performances. Once they've got a good gauge as to whether those jokes are funny or not, they take that information, put it back into their routines, refine, and then deliver a much better product on the final day. Yet, although feedback is incredible for increasing the speed at which we learn, 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗍𝗿, the author of Ultra Learning, really quickly points out that not all feedback is equal. Thus, as learners, we need to learn how to actually identify what feedback will be useful and how to filter out feedback which otherwise would not help us. So, a key takeaway in order to implement this into your own life is to start looking at people who either have the skill or are growing the skill that you want to achieve in, maybe it's public speaking, and get feedback from these people because it's more likely to be accurate for what you want. The other alternative is to practice your craft, let's say guitar playing in front of a crowd, because group consensus usually points towards the more accurate feedback that you're looking for. So to conclude, that pretty much wraps up the 3 most commonly cited habits amongst super learners. An exceptional ability to focus, a ruthlessly direct approach to their learning, and then finally an insatiable hunger for feedback. Now the key here is to not try and implement all of these methods at once, but rather choose one that you think would have an immediate impact. Now personally, I think the best bang for buck is found in direct learning, because it can be as simple as looking at how you're doing something currently, slightly adjusting it, and watching your skill growth improve. So for public speaking, for example, put those books down, stop watching videos, and just practice in front of your friends and family. You'll get so much better at such a quicker rate. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more scientifically backed videos on how to enhance your focus and improve the speed at which you can learn. And until then, I'll see you on the next video.